Grand Dawning, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of the planet. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. I always start my shows off by saying I have a special guest, and I know that gets old, but today I'm really honored and privileged to be speaking with someone who does something that I like to do, and that's travel. But the difference between me and him is that when he's gone for a long time. He has kind of a nomadic existence of sorts in that he's here and there and he connects as he needs to the World Wide Web. But aside from that, he's out in nature, he's seeing different parts of the country, and he aspires to see even more as we continue. So let's bring into our conversation my good friend, Mr. Charles E. Chambers. Charles, how are you today?
Oh, I am well. Hello, Vince.
All All right. Well, we've had some conversation prior to this broadcast, and you shared with me a few of your aspirations, which I referred to in my introduction of you. But I don't want to diminish your history, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about who Charles Chambers is and what you have done in life that has brought you to where you are today.
Excellent. Well, um, in January, I started on this trek. I just decided it was something that I always wanted to do. I decided to pack up my Jeep and go out on this journey. Um, there wasn't much that I planned in doing so because I didn't want to. I wanted to stay in the moment, and I didn't want to bog it down with details. And so the only thing that I knew is I had a few locations that where I wanted to to go to, and then the time wise, I figured I'd leave in January and be back by June. And I did it. I packed it up and I bounced. It was interesting when I left because I had I had everything set up to go, and then when it came time to go, it wasn't that as simple as me rolling out. It was it was that thing, embracing that whole thing of leaving and just going out there. But the reward was awesome. I had a ball. It exceeded whatever expectations I had about the trip, and it it was really the people I met along the way that made it really special. Um, and there was things that I never could have even planned. There was a lot of things that happened just through meeting different people and being in different places. It was awesome.
Okay. So your bio says that you are an information designer.
Yes.
Exactly what is that?
Uh, what I do is I use the title of information designer because I think that more accurately describes what it is that I do. Some people would say I'm a brand developer. Um, what I do is I work with different agencies to design the look and feel for people that are trying to either fill up a venue on an event or package up a product or services. So what I do is I work with a team of people, and what we'll do is put together campaigns for these type of things. An event, for example, if you're familiar with GCuff, um, the branding is all of the signage and program book and the commercials and the Facebook posts. Most of what you see pretty much came off of my laptop. The color schemes, the imagery. In fact, this year was special because the what you'll notice on the cover of the book is this image of this woman, and that was AI created. And a lot of people, it's called. Everyone always comments about that image, and the thing that I think is awesome about it, it was electronically generated. So I brand companies and or their products and services. And I say information designer because it's other terms I find are limited. Um, and the broadest stroke, I package up information in several different ways. And the best way I could describe it is packaging up information. And that's what that is.
So you just kind of get the information, you polish it up, you give it to your clients, and then it makes them look good in the public eye, in a matter of speaking.
That's the short of it. It really is getting an intimate understanding of what their goal is. Because a lot of people say, well, I need this. And often that this isn't that what they need. And then also there's several steps to get to the this that their goal is. So my first job is to hear them, to understand what it is, where they're trying to go, or what the goal is. And sometimes they don't really tell you. It's a funny thing. But in doing this, I've learned that without having taken that step, a clear idea of the goal, everything else I do won't make sense. And so once I have that understanding, then I can start shaping a strategy to go get at that goal.
Hmm.
And so if I
So
say
it,
really
go ahead.
what I do is two things. It's a lot of it has to do on the back end of what I do. It's understanding people and problem solving, and heavy on the problem solving. When I approach a blank page for me, it's a bunch of questions. What's the main idea? Um, what's um, what's the priority of the information to be displayed? How's this going to feel? What audience is it going to reach? And so, really, what I do is solve problems all day, and it comes out in the way of what people would say designer.
That's interesting, Charles. And as I look at what you have on the green screen behind you, it's reflective of your journey, so to speak. And it's really kind of a play on words because when people think about tripping, they think about somebody that's acting out the pocket, but you kind of redefined it to define exactly what you're doing, and that is you are tripping by taking all of these trips. As you were just describing your approach to design, I couldn't help but think that it must be important for you to have an awareness of colors and their impact, and shapes and their impact, and certain things about the design that affect the human psyche. That would probably be something that graphic designers have an awareness of. But you also shared with me that you worked on the news desk at the Akron Beacon Journal. So, what I like to do is perhaps get a little bit of history from you in terms of the things that you have done that led up to you being in this position, to be all over the country, to use your laptop to create these brands for people, to experience the beauty of this country, and at the same time fulfill your needs as an entrepreneur and as a content creator.
Exactly. Excellent question. But yes, I was at the Beacon Journal. Before that, I was in the Marine Corps. Um, and I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. After I came out, I was at Cleveland State for 4 years. And a little bit after I left Cleveland State, I started my own business after I left Cleveland State. In fact, I was working with Johnny O. It's a rap magazine. Um, and I worked for a number of publications here in Cleveland. And then ultimately, I ended up on the news desk of the Akron Beacon Journal. So I did the Sunday and Monday business section, which uh, I always like to point out to people that's the most difficult section of the newspaper. The sports being the easiest, and business being more difficult. And the reason why is that sports is easy. Uh, Maybe easy isn't the word, not as complicated, or because the sports section, everyone loves that sections. You got colorful imagery, and everyone likes their local team. and you got exciting content to work with. You know, Cavs win big, etc. But contrast to that is the business section where you have these. You don't really have much art. You've got guys shaking hands, that grin and grip photo, and then you got these complicated ideas that are of this company buys that company, and then how do you express these business exchanges graphically? And the thing is that I always embraced that challenge, and I enjoyed it. And it's telling the story is always how I approach it. But yes, for me, the graphic behind me, yes, that's so much me. This is where I prefer to be. To me, being out in the forest makes sense, more sense than being inside the city. Much like what you described, it's the color. I think I'm affected by my environment, and I think that's what makes me a designer because I'm sensitive to colors and information, etc. And I think it comes out that way. I think it's the same thing for musicians. I believe that they're probably sensitive to how sound comes, and so it comes out in their music. But for me, yeah, the colors. To me, the stuff inside the city is like a bunch of noise, trash, etc. But out in the forest, everything is just gorgeous. The harmony, the colors, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, it's really kind of revolutionary at this time and space, just because of the plans that the folks who are trying to run things have. There's this notion that we should all live in 15-minute cities,
Right, right.
and Cleveland is one of the cities that's on the list to execute that plan. And the concept is to have everything that you need within a 15-minute walk or bike ride or whatever. But the issue with that is that you're bringing all these people into that place that you just described. And if you don't have those spaces in your environment, the places where there are trees and ponds and lakes and so forth and so on, you get away from that. But then when you do your homework, you find out how important it is to be in those spaces, because being in those spaces has a regenerative effect on you. For instance, there's a phenomenon called forest bathing. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
With forest bathing, basically you go into a forest and you get the benefit of the oxygen that comes from the plants, and the fact that while you're in that environment, the positive ions that are connected to your body that cause dysfunction are being shed.
Mm-hmm.
So, it allows you to be in a meditative state just because of the fact that you're surrounded by all these things. And, as we have this conversation, even though you may not have a conscious awareness of the scientific aspect, that when you're in that place, something about it feels right to you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. I could feel the difference when I'm out there, and
Hmm.
I'm completely drawn. Because
Yes.
before the type of camping that I'm doing now is with my Jeep, but before that, I was backpacking into these spaces where in the Allegheny Mountains. Um, I would do it all year round, and particularly in the winter time. I prefer camping in the winter because one, there's not it's not as populated, and there's a quietness still. The forest is completely different. It has a different look in the winter than it does in the summertime because you got the summertime, you got the canopy, a whole bunch of colors, etc. And then in the winter, it's just this blanket of white,
Okay.
pristine snow.
Well, I want to talk to you more about that. We got to break away for a few moments, but we'll be right back. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is information designer Charles Chambers, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my conversation with Charles Chambers. He is an information designer he's an artist. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there like that. I know that he is aware of the science of graphic art and design and all of that. But in addition to all of that, he is someone who enjoys being out in nature. Now, for you to be out somewhere camping in the middle of wintertime is
Mhm.
extraordinary, especially being someone who has melanin to the extent that you do. And just so folks know, melanin is not just about skin color because it goes a lot deeper than that. But when I think about melanated folks, I think about warmer climes. And for me, there's not really much attractive about being outside in the cold in the dead of winter, but you have that disposition. So I want to give you and more of an opportunity to talk about what you get from that experience.
Yeah, exactly. Believe it or not, you can get comfortable out there. Well, I was. It's really about having the proper gear, and with the right gear, um, there's things you can do to adjust to the climate. Really, to tell you the truth, it's to me it's more difficult to camp backpack in the summertime than it is in the winter. In the summertime, you have to carry more water, and it's hot, and climbing a mountain in the heat. Um, you just can't drink enough water. You can't get cool enough. It to me it takes more out of you in the summertime than it does in the winter. In the wintertime, is just loosening up my jacket, controls my body heat. You don't have to carry as much water. We used to snow. And actually, we were staying in caves. And so we were able to have a fire in the space that we were in to warm up. And then there's other things we could do. We would warm up our water bottles and put those inside our sleeping bags at night and be just as toasty as having a quality sleeping bag, quality coat. And I mean, up to below zero, you can be quite comfortable. But yes, um, and then there's the stillness in the air. There's also I do this because the reward people ask the reward is always way better than it's always worth it. Always.
Yeah. Well, the biggest challenge for me during the winter months is keeping my hands and feet cold. I mean, warm. If I can keep my hands warm and my feet warm, I'm okay. So my typical approach during wintertime is to just dress with a whole bunch of layers.
Right.
And if when I come into a place that's too warm, I just take layers off. But when I'm outside, I just make sure to stay layered up.
Right.
Um, can you talk about some of the places that you've been, and you can talk about those places that you have experienced during the cold, but you can also talk about some of those uncomfortable summer type places.
Sure. Sure. Um, well, West Virginia, those are the largest mountains near us. And so I've camped out there uh, several times. Uh, and Mostly it would be in the summertime. In the wintertime, it was only because I was so familiar with the Allegheny Mountains. It is dangerous because we wouldn't take our tents. And it was only because we knew where the caves were that we would go there. Um, because and that with the lighter tent, hiking through the snow is it lightens our pack and it makes it easier. But I've camped everywhere from the Allegheny Mountains down in West Virginia. On this last trip, I I stopped at I was more focused on the off road camps and that all of these off road parks and all of these off road parks they have campsites, and so my trek was really designed around the off road parks that I could find from Google that led me from here to Florida and then from Florida to Houston. And so I stopped in West Virginia. I was there for a weekend. I kept my drive time down to under 6 hours, and then I drive for 6 hours, set up my camp, etc. And then I went to North Carolina from there, and then I went into Atlanta, um, and then from Atlanta on into Florida. I stayed in Florida and camped at several sites for 2 months while I was there. So it was a combination of Airbnbs, um, camping out in their forests, and visiting family. But I really love Florida. Florida, um, there was so much activities because it wasn't only about the camping; it was about experiencing the activities that they had there. And I should say that the real start of this trip was happened 3 years ago, and what that was about was really me embracing. Um, I was after this freedom. It was me letting go of things. I quit drinking alcohol, and that for me, when I say quit drinking, it was for me that was huge because I've drank all my life, and that was a major part of me. I couldn't see myself without the alcohol, but it got into a point where it was I was pretty much consumed by it. Um, I was at my bottom to the point where it was my health was heavily affected by it. I thought I was going to die. It was that bad. I had these severe migraines, chronic all the time. I wasn't sleeping well at all. I felt life just leaving me. It wasn't living. And I knew that I either had to stop drinking or that would be it. I knew it. I could feel it. I was lifeless. And it got to that. I tried quitting for a while and it didn't work. It wasn't until I got to the point where I asked for help. My cousin Yolanda, I couldn't do it myself. I couldn't even make a phone call. Not that I couldn't call anyone. I didn't. And so I asked for help. That was the biggest change. And from there, it was a choice to live. And I've been making that choice ever since then. And then it became, okay, well, how am I going to live? And that's where the idea of, hey, these things that I thought of doing, one, having a Jeep, bought a Jeep. Hey, I wanted to travel. I wanted to be free from, I didn't want life to be dependent on the space that I was in. I wanted to travel. And so the job, I worked virtually even at home. And so I figured, hey, I could do this out in the middle of the forest or wherever I'm at. And so I did.
Mhm. Did you at any point ever come to an understanding of what caused you to medicate with alcohol?
And that's a good question. No, I'm not sure. I haven't really spent much time thinking about it either. I think for me, I don't think there was any situation, or I think it was a thing. I loved the taste of it. I enjoyed the effect of it. Um, my family, I grew up with a family. That's what we did. I understood it as that's just what people do, is how I understood in my mind. And I thought everybody did it. I had been through treatment before. When I was in the Marine Corps, I had gotten in trouble, and it turns out they sent me to treatment. That was the first time that someone had told me, said to me, you don't have to drink. I can remember that to this day because it was like it was earth shattering to me. I had never heard that. I just thought that was just part of what people do, and so I've been exposed to recovery. I went through the VA several years back, and I'd been in and out of it. But I think the thing that I struggle with most is that I just couldn't see life without drinking. And what's different about this time? One, I'm I don't feel that way anywhere. I I I understand. I have a different understanding now of it. I just know that it's not for me. It's people in my family, they still drink and etc. And I'm around people that do it, but in my heart, my soul, it's not something that I feel like I have to have anymore. And today I could see myself without it. And I'm not driven by it. And that's part of that freedom that I was talking about. And so when I quit drinking, I wanted even more. I was still smoking cigarettes and smoking other stuff. And I understood, I felt the weight of that, and that's still holding on me. It was something else so I quit smoking cigarettes. And it wasn't immediate. It took a lot for me to quit smoking. And I have to say that I had some breathing problems that put me in the hospital. And because I diagnosed as COPD, and it was coupled with COVID. And after that episode, I decided that's it. So I let go of the cigarettes. And I let go of smoking marijuana because, well, it was something else that I was looking for. I'm working on this freedom that I described is really not being dependent on anything outside of me. That the joy and life it all comes from inside of me. And so packing up the Jeep and leaving, it's really about me uh, practicing, well, saying to myself that I don't need all of this stuff at home, that I could live, that this is, I could have joy and life experiences without all these things. And so it's this the tripping is not limited to the geological location. I'm tripping by these experiences mentally and physically.
Yeah, I really get that, Charles, and I think it's kind of brilliant in a way. You know, I don't want to get the fact that you served in the Marines for 4 years. I don't want that to get lost. So, talk about what it was like to be a soldier and to deal with all the weight or the consequences of being a black man in a white man's army.
Oh, that's a good question, Vince. Uh, I joined the Marine Corps. I was really looking for. There was a number of things. I grew up without a father, so I was looking for this idea of manhood. Of I thought that I thought that the Marine Corps was going to give me this whatever it was that I was looking for. I didn't want to go in the Navy. Didn't want to be in the Army. I felt that I understood that the Marine Corps had the longest, hardest boot camp, and I felt I'm that hard headed that I would need that kind of thing. So I went into the Marine Corps expect with these expectations that they're going to turn me into this cat. And after being in there, I wrote my mom this long letter explaining this, that I came in looking for this, that, and that. And it turns out that all of these things that I was looking for were already in front of me, were already inside of me. And what they did was just provide an atmosphere for all this stuff to come out, by challenging me and me addressing the challenges. And back then, I do remember entertaining the idea of standing there for 30 years, figuring, hey, I could go quick 30 and then get out. But once I was in and looking at the people that stayed in for 30 years, they all looked older than their chronological age. Being in the military, for me, didn't really it didn't really work for me. One, they're not looking for any. The, the military is all about instant obedience to order. They're not looking for any creativity. It's the lifestyle is pretty much you you do as you're told. It's just
It's really another level of control,
Yeah.
and I guess the antithesis of that is the freedom that you were experiencing with your present lifestyle. I want to talk to you a bit more about that and a few other things that might surprise you when we return. You are watching and listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is Charles Chambers, and my brother is all over the place. We're going to talk about some of those places when we get back. Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and the conversation with my guest, Charles Chambers, who just shared with us his experience in the Marines. But you also shared in the process the fact that you grew up without a father. And I want to talk to you about that. Um, I happen to have a father who grew up without his father, and he ended up in the Air Force for 22 years.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if his motive was the same as yours, but he did successfully leverage his military experience to be able to take care of his family.
Mm-hmm.
And he has two granddaughters who both enlisted in the Air Force. They are, one is a captain who is on the verge of becoming a major, and the other one is a lieutenant who graduated from the Air Force Academy. But I decided
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't want to have anything to do with military experience because I saw the impact that it had on my dad's life. And I can tell you that towards the end of his career, I was able to witness the level of stress that he was dealing with. My
Mm-hmm.
father has transitioned, but I have stories that I get from my mother about certain things that he went through. So, I noticed that, a lot of times when we have children who perhaps need some type of discipline or need some kind of order in their life or just looking at a way out and know that they're not necessarily suited to go to college or unable to find meaningful employment, they resort to the military, and some end up being successful and some don't. But I just find it interesting that you made that choice. But I also find it interesting that the life that you're living now enables you to experience a level of freedom that many people don't experience. In a conversation that we had a few days ago, I talked about how great it is for you to be out in nature and to be disconnected of sorts. And you let me know that despite the fact that you're out there, there are times that you do have to connect. But I just want to relay the message to those who are listening that it is extremely important to disengage from electronic media and on all that other kind of stuff and to connect with nature. And obviously, based on what you've shared with us, you've been able to successfully navigate that. In addition to liberating yourself from dependence on substances that have literally changed your entire disposition, put you in a place where you can look forward to those things and you can experience your freedom in those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Vince. Again, being out there makes more sense. And there's so much, there's a lot of activity that's out there. And, um, well, I was trying to figure out uh, Black folks, African Americans, we don't go camping all that much. I've been to several, a gazillion camps on this side, on the east side of the states, and rarely do I see Black families out there. And um, our the camps, these campsites, they have facilities that are awesome. I've seen better restrooms in these at these state parks than there are in some of these restaurants I go to in the city. It's the facilities are nice. It's the cost of a family vacationing with camping is way lower than taking the whole family to Disneyland or to Vegas or and the experience for the kids. What I often see is these white families with they're raising their kids every summer taking them out there, exposing them to nature. There's so much education out there, and it's so much of a different type of life than that you can't get otherwise. And so, yes, I agree. It is extremely important that camping becomes more of our culture. I would love to be a part of helping moving that idea. I don't know where it comes from that we don't camp, but somehow that's a conversation. Most people are surprised when I say when they find out that I do.
Hmm. Early in our conversation, you mentioned a we when you were talking about some of the activities that you have outside of the city. Uh, is there a family or a group that you're connected to that participates in what you do?
Sure, there for this trip. No, this trip was a solo trip, but in the past, yes, I've worked with. I had a partner. He and I basically we would take inner city youth out to expose them to this thing of camping. We would take them out to the Allegheny Forest for the weekend, um, and we it was a rites of passage of sorts. We would take high school age kids, and for most of them, this was their first time away from their moms or being out all night. And we would teach them about survival, some basic survival techniques, how to start a fire, shelter, and how to eat out there, the basics. And I believe that uh, a rites of passage of some sort should be in place for just about all communities.
Yeah, it's so true. I work with Mwatabu Okanta, who is chair of the Department of Africana Studies at Kent State University, and Dr. Quad David Whitaker, also known as
Whitaker.
uh, Nana Kra Kwamina II. And they have been facilitating rites of passage at Kent
Mhm.
State and West Virginia University. And then there's also Paul Hill, who
Right.
has Naropi, which is a National Rites of Passage Institute. And I think one of the things that's really severely lacking in our public school education is access to that paradigm, that because it has a transformative effect on the children that go through it.
And
Uh,
adults.
yeah, and adults, absolutely.
Uh,
I went through a rite of passage, so to speak, visiting Africa. Well, actually, a few rites. One, I was given a name, which is Baba Yao Ansa. It's an Akan name that I got as a result of my relationship to them.
Yes.
But back in 2019, I went to Egypt and Sudan, and the last night that I was there, I slept in a pup tent on the desert floor in Merowe. And this was yards away from a rest facility. I mean, like maybe a 5 or 10 minute walk from a rest facility, or maybe longer than that. I don't even know what the distance was. But for me, that was kind of a rite of passage because I went through something that I wouldn't ordinarily go through in real life. So I can definitely appreciate what you said about that. If you wanted to respond, you can, or I have another issue to talk to you about.
That works. I had went through the rites of passage with Paul Hill, David Whitaker, absolutely, and those
Oh,
guys, Bob OJ.
mhm.
It's and yeah, I'm sure we could go on for days about that topic. That's a whole another topic itself.
It is, but it's important for us to mention that just so that people can know that if they want to have an impact on their child's life, to
Yes.
make sure that they have that experience. Because what it does, among other things, is it gives you an awareness of what your purpose in life is and what your responsibility to the community is. And when I look at your life, I can see that exemplified in what you're doing now and what you have done in the past. I also wanted to talk to you about what it was like for you to live without a father. What impact did that have on your life?
Um, That's an interesting question. In that, well, that's the only life I know, without a father. So I'm not sure. I grew up in a matriarch. It was my grandmother that um, she had 12 kids, and so there was my grandmother and then my aunts. And they were intimately in my life. In fact, I grew up with my aunts as if they were my mother, and my uncles as well. The For me, even though my father wasn't in my life, we had such a close. Um, we were also close that I was able to take from my examples from my uncles, and so from each of them, I there's part of me, there's part of them in me from all five of my different uncles, and all of them to me were extraordinary men. They were stand-up cats that I looked up to. Literally, I come from a big family. I'm 6'4", and my uncles are taller than me, and these cats with big, wide shoulders, and like I'm small around these guys, so they're like giants. And the way they take care of their family and go about their business is, these were awesome cats to model myself after, and that's really who I am. And then on the other side of that, I had my aunts. And again, all of them with different personalities, different traits that I borrow from all the time, and all of who I am is really my family.
Mm.
It's not just my mom, and I'm working on a relation. My father is here. It's just that he wasn't in our household, and um I I believe it's important to have that relationship with my father. It hasn't been we haven't been connected. It's been a struggle with that part, but I think that's important as well. But for me, and I grew up with my family. All of even the work that I do, it started from me doing stuff for my family. Um, Even speaking in front of people, I started speaking in front of the family. I would draw things for the family. Most of what I do, and all of us being close, we all hang out with each other. So my mother and her sisters and brothers were really close, and so their kids, whatever they were doing, we would all go with them. And so we grew up as kids like brothers and sisters, my cousins. um, a lot of us, if you were to ask me who are my friends, half of them would be family.
Mm. That's interesting, and kudos to your uncles for stepping up to the plate and serving in that fatherly role for you as a developing person. We're going to talk about your career as this information designer because I want to dive into that a bit more, but we have to step away for just a few moments. So stay with us. You are listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Belcar Community Radio. Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my guest Charles Chambers, who has accomplished so much in life. I'm just really in awe of a person who could sleep in a tent on top of the snow in the Allegheny Mountains. That's phenomenal to me, as well as some of the other things that you do. And you also mentioned that it's your intention to travel to Canada and Alaska, and I know it's going to be plenty cold up there. Uh,
Hmm.
we also talked about your family situation, and you relayed to us that you grew up without your father, but you did have uncles who stepped up to the plate. It was a matriarchal situation, so that there were women who affected you in that sense. And then you talked about being 6'2" and having uncles that were even taller than you. So, the fact that you're 6'2" makes you above average, because
Right.
the average height is lower than that. So, I would take all that to say that Charles Chambers, you are an exceptional individual for
Mhm.
many reasons. You've been able to step away from being in that news desk that you were at the Akron Beacon Journal, and other situations where you might have been confined to a cubicle. You take your laptop, you take your Jeep, and you go exploring around the country and experiencing what you do at the various campsites that you do. I'm curious about the folks that you encounter, because you said that there were a lot of white folks that do what they do and you don't find too many black families out there. What's it like for you to be, I don't want to use the term minority because I don't ascribe to describing us as minorities, but in that sense, based on what you said, you are. And as black people in this country, we deal with the implications. I don't want to call it baggage because it's not
Mhm.
baggage to be a black person, but there are implications. What do you encounter as you're in these various places where you don't see many of us?
Right. Um, it gets interesting. Sometimes I put it as like the looks that I get is like it's a Sasquatch sighting. Something total unique that you don't see. The white folks, they get curious, and well, one, it's like, oh, it's a black, um, because it is rare, and then when I do see black people out there, it's like, you get all excited, right? And but it is amazing that I've been in camps all up and down, from Route 10 to Route 90, and I just don't see us out there, and it's incredible. But yeah, sometimes, often there's this camaraderie with campers that you sort of there's this friendly environment most of the time, but there are some people that are out there that I'd see them looking the other way or avoiding the opportunity to even look at me or wave. And that's sort of wild. The way I separate them, it's like, oh, they probably voted for Trump. Those are Trump voters over there, and those are the right. But other than often striking up conversations with campers, usually we're trading ideas and recipes. It's an interesting kind of thing. Same thing with Jeepers. I'd also look for the local Jeep clubs when I travel to find out what's going on, etc., to connect with other people. But the camping thing, most of it is solo. It's the going into the campsite and coming out is when I'm interacting with people. Outside of that, I'm on my own campsite and I'm doing my own thing. A lot of people ask me, am I concerned about being out there and it's all of these white people? And no, I'm not. If I if I got concerned with all of the stuff that could affect me on this trip, I wouldn't even leave the house. And at some degree, it's I'm stepping out there, um, you know, uh, um, I'm stepping out there on faith, but that's the whole point of the trip.
Yeah, I would say you're stepping out on faith, but you're also stepping out without fear.
Right,
And I think fear is really what
right,
hinders people from having the kinds of experiences as you do.
true.
For instance, I have a sister that she's just extremely scared of snakes. So, so if you talk to her about being in a tent somewhere where there might be snakes, that's not going to happen for her, you know. And in addition to that, there are all the other critters out there. But, you know, many times those things are more scared of you than you are of them, you
Exactly.
know. But I also wanted to get to how rewarding it is for you to be in those situations. And you mentioned the Jeep clubs and camper. Uh, it's kind of like a subculture.
Yes.
How rewarding it is for you to connect with people in that sense and have those genuine conversations where they see you as a compatriot or a fellow
Right.
person, and they're not looking at the fact that you're a black man, but that you are a camper like them, and
Right.
you're able to exchange information.
Exactly. It's a beautiful thing. It's and that's part of that's part of the trip. That's a big part of the trip, is that human connection that you're asking about. And it it's and I doubt if I would have that type of. I've met people of all sorts, and I doubt if that would have happened otherwise. You know, so
Yeah.
I couldn't say enough about the camping experience. One, internally and externally, with the benefits of being out there. I When I was in Florida, so I was in the forest for 10 days straight, and um, by the time I came out, what struck me the most was the sound, the noise. So out there, I was in the middle of Florida, where I couldn't hear any traffic. All I heard was just nature. I didn't see much of the city. I was 4 miles into the forest, away from a 2-lane road, and there's none but darkness driving in. On one of my videos, I recorded the video of the drive to my campsite. It's this 4 mile long dirt road, and it's basically literally taking me to the middle of Florida where there's nothing. I always camped in a primitive site, and that was deliberate, um, because there's least campers there, and there's anyway. But So sometimes it would get unnerving, and what I mean by that is, at this particular time during the week, there's no one in the campsite. Like, most campers come in on a Thursday and they camp the weekend, and I was there uh, throughout the whole week, Monday through Friday, for 2 weeks. And so during this particular day, I'd have to go into the city to charge up my batteries, and then I go back out to the campsite, or sometimes I'm just traveling, doing some off road, or visiting some sort of activity, visiting different spots, that locations. But one particular night, I'm going back to my campsite, and it's just pitch black. And so I videotape. I was trying to show folks how dark it was out there, and so I turn off my lights so you could see the darkness. But on the video, it doesn't capture how dark can be.
Right.
You know, and then driving 4 miles into that darkness, dark, right? And it was just me out there. Um, and so I would have these moments where it's like, it does, sort of say, hey, you know, but it's the thing of, again, accepting that. And it wasn't paralyzing. It was just something that I noticed. I took a look at it and then moved on.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, living where I do right now, I'm less than a quarter mile from I-90. I live on 105th Street, north of St. Clair, south of Bratnall, and
Right.
I hear the freeway all
Mm.
day and all night. I mean, it's kind of like the sound of the ocean if you live on a seashore. But I can just imagine you being 4 miles away from a two-lane road, and at
Mm.
night being able to look up at the sky and see
Oh
the
my.
stars the way we don't see them while we live in the city. And also to be surrounded by the cacophony of sounds from nature. So the crickets and the other things that make those noises. People really take those things for granted,
Yeah.
but it is something that affects us on a vibrational level. And I would go as far as to say, I think that being in those places have gone a long way towards your restoration
Yes.
and your level of mental and physical and spiritual health. So I commend you for taking those leaps. I don't want to get away from talking about your career as an information designer, because I think it's important for people to have access to you to do those kinds of things. So why don't we shift gears and talk about that briefly, because we just have about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Okay.
But let's talk about what you're doing as an information designer and give folks an opportunity to connect with you on that level.
Absolutely. Uh, um, I so I have a career. I had a full career as a journalist, working for newspaper. It wasn't just the Beacon Journal, but I worked for several magazines. And the newspaper industry, when the industry started going down, I jumped ship. And that's when I built my business, CEC Imaging. And again, what I do for companies is I help them develop their brand. Um, for example, there's a few people, uh, recent terms I've worked with, uh, Chantel Brown. So everything that you would have seen with her campaign, from the website to all of the signage, her logo design, the colors that she used, was all developed, conceptualized, right off of this laptop. And a lot of other politicians, Blaine Griffin, and several other council people. Some of the, um, well, it's all on my site, cecimaging.com. And then I work with other agencies, uh, startup companies, or there's other agencies that'll contact me to be on a team that'll develop a brand. Also, I just did the G Cuffs Film Festival. Interesting thing about that is that most of what you see in this festival, all was developed while I was in the force. And so, in walking through this film festival, is interesting. It takes me back to where I was when I was putting this signage together, or whatever the product, even the book design. It takes me back to where I was when I was in Florida. I also worked for a company, and speaking of Florida, I worked for a youth organization in Florida, helping them with their brand, and a company in DC. And I've built relationships around the country. That's also what helps me travel around it. I'll go to certain that'll become a destination while I'm traveling, but I'm not
Okay.
limiting to those places.
Okay. Well, Charles, you've given us a lot to chew on, and I want to thank you for being with me on this broadcast. I've learned a lot about you, and I can honestly say that you are a rock star in what you do. And I'm hopeful that folks will reach out to you to take advantage of what you do, and also learn to enjoy the benefits of being outside. Thanks
Yeah.
for joining me.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks for
Uh,
having me. This
uh,
was awesome.
yeah, this has been a pleasure. To those of you who are listening, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace.